former marine biologist, a convicted felon in the United States, half-assed hybrid of scientist and science fiction author. I am, I believe, hardwired to write. I discovered marine biology at about the same time that I discovered science fiction, which was a radio play played when I was like, I guess, 6 or 7 years old. A radio broadcast of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So basically, you know, from that point on, I scribbled. I tried to pass. I wrote a little version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea out and handed it off to my parents, pretending that I had written it myself. Either my parents were not especially versed in the works of Verne, or they just lied to keep me happy, but they seemed to be impressed. And pretty much since then, I have written in all the spare corners of my life, and I have been interested in science in all the spare corners of my life. And amazingly, I have been both a professional scientist and a professional author, which I really can't complain about. But I never actually got published until I was almost 40 years old, which given that when I started writing when I was 6, is kind of a long lead-in. My first story, A Niche, was published in a small Canadian press, and it was noticed by an editor, David Hartwell at Tor. And David Hartwell found out, not because I told him, but because somebody else did, that I was working on a novel based on that story. And he sent word to me that he would be interested in taking a look at it when I finished. So I managed to avoid the whole slush pile, the constant rejections. I basically could get in the back door, which still didn't stop him from keeping me waiting for 18 months. I find her a sympathetic character. Lenny Clark is based on a woman I was involved with before I wrote the book. The physical description of Lenny Clark is pretty much describes this other woman, Susan O'Shannon, who I dedicated the book to, with the exception that I had to desexualize her a little bit because Fisher, the pedophile, had to be interested in her, and if she was too obviously adult-looking, Fisher would not be interested in her. So Lenny Clark has smaller breasts than the actual person that I based her on. but other than that, the physical description is the same. In terms of the psychology, I have no clue. I do not know if this was my attempt to kind of work through what might have been going on in her head, and it's probably wrong. But when I was writing the character, I was dating a woman who worked at the domestic violence lab at the University of British Columbia. And so she gave me some guidance as to what some of the things that go on in the heads of people with histories of sexual. I don't know if either of you scuba dives.
No.
Okay, there are times when you get down to a certain depth, and you're swimming along, and it's kind of gray-green, and the sun goes behind a cloud or something, but you're too deep to actually see the sun. All you know is that you're swimming along, and all of a sudden something very dark has just appeared above you. And in many of the places that I go diving on the West Coast, there are killer whales. So there's this lizard brain fear when you're swimming along, and all of a sudden there's this huge shadow over you. You feel that you're going to turn around, and the last thing you are going to see is this big open crescent mouth full of teeth the size of fists. Obviously that hasn't happened, but the feeling sticks in your mind. Superficially, it's a book about dysfunctional people trapped in a literally high-pressure environment at the bottom of the ocean. Thematically, though, it's really more of a metaphor for the observation that Western civilization is built on the backs of an outclass, of an outgroup. There are, in my experience, two such classes. There is just the oppressed out-group that every human civilization seems to find, whether it's women, whether it's a different ethnic or racial group, whether it's children. There's always somebody who makes cheap Nikes for us for 5 cents a day under horrible conditions, and so that we can maintain our fashion and our flat screen TVs. But there's this other group that I discovered in academia, and they're the ones that actually invent the microwaves and the genetically engineered poodles. And these people are dysfunctional in their way. If you ask yourself the question, you have two different types of people, and one of them is happy and well-adjusted and has a good family life, takes their weekends off. The other one is chain-smoking, obsessive, can't stop working. If they have a family, they neglect that family because they're constantly trying to get the approval of a disapproving parent who will never think that they amount to anything. The question is, which of these types is more likely to make a scientific breakthrough? In my experience, it's the people who are fucked in the head because they are driven to work. That's all they do.